You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 8, Episode 15. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Well, hey friend, and welcome to Feathers this week. I cannot believe we are on episode 15. Only this one and then one next week will be the season finale. I have loved this season, and I am so excited about our last two guests to close out season 8. This week we have someone on that I have wanted on since the moment this podcast started. If you're a blog reader or on social media a lot, I'm sure you will know her. It is Kristen Welch of wearethatfamily.com, and she is also the founder of Mercy House Kenya, which is a ministry that does many things, but at its core runs a transition house for young rescued mothers in Kenya. I mean, her ministry does so many things locally and globally at this point. And the thing that I love is Crystal's personal story of how all of this started. It's just incredible. God really turned her life upside down, and it has been awesome to watch these last 10 years and all of that come about. So Kristen is an inspiration to me. She also challenges me, and I appreciate that about her. So I am honored to have her on the podcast today and hope you enjoy my conversation with Kristen Welch. Well, hey, Kristen, and welcome to Feathers today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I have wanted you on the podcast for the last 3 years that we have been in existence. So it took, I don't know, what season are we in? 8 seasons, but glad to have you here. Actually, I was going back in my blog to figure out how long that I've been reading your blog or we've been connected or something. I knew it had been a long time. Mm-hmm. But we're going to do some throwback here, blogging throwback. Works for Me Wednesday.
Yes.
Does that ring any bells?
Yes, a lifetime ago it feels like. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, how did you, at some point, Shannon with Rocks in My Dryer way back.
Yes.
I mean, this is like 2007 blogging. Mm-hmm. Did you take that over from her?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, she actually, we had met in real life. I had only been blogging for probably a year, and we just hit it off, and she was really just someone I admired, and she kind of took me under her wing and mentored me in blogging. And so when she decided to step away from her blogging platform, she basically gave me Works For Me Wednesday, and it was a huge blessing and really fun and connected me to a lot of people. And at that point, I had no idea what turn my life was going to take and what God was going to do with my blog and that platform. So I know that that's all providential, and I feel like I owe her a lot, I guess, for sharing what she had with me.
So, oh my goodness. So for people that were in the blogging world, Works For Me Wednesday, I think we just basically shared a tip, basically anything that made your life better every Wednesday. I was looking back at some of mine. I mean, like, people do not go look on my blog. Some of the stuff was so silly, but I mean, I think it really was a connection point for a lot of us to get out and meet people and stuff like that. And I'm so glad we got, I was connected to you, and just to be able to watch that journey that God has had you on since then. Goodness, that's been, I don't know how long. I think the first one I saw that I was connected with you was like 2010 or something like that. But
yeah, it's been almost a decade, so it's crazy.
It is crazy. Yep. So, and today I want to be able to share, that story of what God has done. But first, I haven't even done it. How about for people that don't know you, how about you introduce yourself and your family?
Sure. Well, my name is Kristen Welch, and I'm a blogger at wearethatfamily.com. I actually am the founder of Mercy House Global, which is a nonprofit that empowers women in poverty with fair trade jobs, and all of the fair trade product that we sell actually supports 3 maternity centers in Nairobi, Kenya. And I've been married 23 years and have 3 kids, an 18-year-old, one that's almost 16, and an 11-year-old. So that's a little bio.
Which is just crazy to think about a decade ago how old your kids were. Oh my goodness. That's what I've told several people. I think I had Jen Schmidt on this season. I was telling, I feel like I've just watched people's families grow up,
Yeah, definitely. My kids have grown up for sure on online, I guess, as well as in real life.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I definitely want to talk about everything. Oh my goodness, we can't obviously go through every, all the minutia of the last 10 years. But I would like for you to share a bit about really how the blogging world got you started on this new journey of Mercy House Global. Maybe there's people who aren't familiar with your story. If you could just give us just kind of like the high level of, how that all got started.
Yeah, so in 2010, I was blogging at We Are That Family. I had been blogging for about 3 years at that point, and was doing Works For Me Wednesday, and my blog was growing, and I had really just connected online to this community of mothers on the other side of their screens and found a lot of joy in that. But at the same time, I would really describe myself as a Christian who didn't have a lot of purpose. I was sort of floundering, I guess is the right word, just maybe emptier than I should be. And it was in that time frame that I was invited by Compassion International to travel to Nairobi, Kenya, to be a part of their Compassion blogging trip, where they encourage bloggers to come to a third world country and write about poverty in an effort to get kids sponsored. And so when I got that invitation, I immediately said no, because I didn't think I had it in me to travel overseas and leave my really young children at a time. And when I told my husband that I had turned it down, he just thought I was crazy and said, "This is going to change your life." And I said, "I know. That's why I don't want to do it." But we just had a heart to heart, and he said, "I think it needs to change your life." And he had seen just the emptiness, I think. I was really buying into the American dream at that point in my life. I called our house our starter home. I went to Target 4 days a week and bought things we didn't need. And, I just was empty. And so I called back and said, "Yes, I'll go on this trip." And he was right. It did change my life. And I basically woke up in a slum in Kenya in a literal way and in a spiritual way. I thought I had gone to Nairobi to write about other people's stories, but really God used it to rewrite my story. And I just came face to face with people who had more joy than I had, and they had more purpose than I had, and they had made Jesus enough in their lives, and I hadn't. And it wrecked me in every descriptive way you can imagine. It shattered everything I thought I knew about God, about myself. And I returned home from that 3-week trip just a completely different person. And every trip to Kenya since, I feel like I'm in that same spot. I actually just returned this past week, and last night I had the women over who I took with me, and we talked about that reentry and everything you feel when you are straddling a first world and a third. And it really just redefines your normal. And that's what happened to me in 2010. My normal was just totally redefined. And I realized that I was 37 years old, and motherhood was very fulfilling for me. But at the same time, I just had this epiphany that God had led me to places before in my life through difficulties in my marriage or financial struggles, whatever, however he uses our situations to redeem us. But I had never responded in a way that changed my life. I had responded because doing nothing is a response. But unfortunately, I hadn't really responded in a way that required action or obedience. And so when I returned from that trip in 2010, I made a vow to God and to myself that I would not live the same, and that I would take all the faith and all of the everything that had been poured into me as a Christian. I was just this really big, fat, comfortable, lazy Christian at the time, that I would take all of that and I would put action and obedience to my steps. And that's when we started Mercy House.
And I remember watching you on that trip, because that was something that you guys wrote about every day, and listen to the stories. And I mean, even sitting here just reading the words from your trip, I mean, you knew things were going to be different for you. Out of all, I mean, there was a lot of Compassion trips. You guys weren't the only trip that Compassion did
Right.
over the years, but definitely something different happened. And I'm not saying people weren't changed. Other people weren't changed by any means, but it was one of those like turning points that really was going to change the rest of your life. So how do you jump from, I mean, your world is rocked because you're seeing this poverty, and that world is living not anything like our world. Mm-hmm. You want to do something, but that has got to be an overwhelming. I think that's because I honestly have I've never been to a third world country. I've actually never been out of the United States, other than on a cruise to Mexico. So I'm asking genuinely, how do you go there and see the overwhelming, need, and then come back and even know where to start? What did that look like?
Well, it was very painful. I'll tell you that. I had this blog that had taken me to Africa to begin with. And so I processed on that blog. And I remember one day for months after the trip, it was just the messiest, ugliest, emotional dump. Everything I thought, feared, how disgusted I was with myself for all of the stuff that I had. And it was not I'm sure I lost a lot of readers during that time. But one day this lady emailed me and she was like, it feels like you're in labor, like you're about to give birth to something. And I remember reading that thinking that was the perfect description, but I didn't even know what that was when I read that. Of course, looking back, that's exactly what it was. It was hard, grueling labor. Because it's really hard to know what God wants you to do. And I've had so many people ask me that question, because they want to respond and, what does that look like? And I really feel like it's three things that collide in order to find that sweet spot. And that's just my term for it. It's your passion. What are you passionate about? Your skill. What are you good at? And God's timing. And when those three things collide and you're willing to do what God asks you to do, miraculous things happen. And that's what it was for me. I was very passionate about motherhood and mothers. I had found community and joy in a blog for mothers, by mothers, and, by a mother. And, I was a writer, and that's my skill, and I was a good writer. Not necessarily a fantastic writer, but it was something I felt good, a skill that I had. And so when that collided with God's timing, which was after that trip, I just found my sweet spot. And I think when I returned, I offered that to God. I just laid it down on an altar and said, I want to respond in a way that glorifies you and that puts boots on the ground and physically helps these women that I feel so burdened for. And it was interesting because, it took me 5 years to become a mom. I went through a lot of infertility treatments. And by the time I became a mother, I was just overjoyed, and I cherished motherhood. And then motherhood in a lot of ways saved me, writing to moms and finding a community because I had quit work and I was lonely, and it was like this lifeline to meet other mothers on the other side of the screen. And then God burdened me for these young girls who were becoming mothers in Kenya against their will. Most of them were survival prostitutes or rape victims, and they were becoming moms. And so I just felt like God speak to me and say, I want you to connect moms who have with moms who don't have. And I'm going to heal both of them. I'm going to fulfill the moms who have, but they don't have an outlet. They don't really know how to connect with moms who don't have it. I'm going to make you the conduit. I'm going to put you in the middle of that. And that's what God did. And that's really, that is the train of thought that really started Mercy House. Of course, a lot of miraculous and impossible things happened. One was connecting with a brilliant woman in Kenya who was actually my tour guide in the slum She had grown up as a compassion sponsored child, connecting with her and really just deciding we want to do something together to help these women. And so she and her husband, 10 years later are still running, the entire ministry in Kenya, and we partnered to do this work together. If I had to start over and redo it and, try to recreate everything that happened, I couldn't do it. It has been divine, and it is what God wanted us to do. And I think that that's where there's so much fear in the unknown and uncertainty. And I remember when my husband and I stepped out and like told people we're starting maternity homes in Kenya, the looks on people's faces and the doubt and the fear and the, you're going to financially ruin yourselves. And I mean, we had so many negative voices, really, more than positive for sure. And I remember laying in bed with my husband that night that I actually announced this Mercy House on my blog, and I was crying and he was holding me, and I said, this is what it feels like to jump out of an airplane. And he said, yeah, we're still falling. I mean, we haven't landed yet. And it was a huge risk, but I think God asked us to take risk for the kingdom, not because we know what we're doing or because we're adequate or because we have it all together, but because He uses our weakness and is made perfect in that. And He does the impossible with people who are willing. And so that's really our story. It's not because we know what we're doing or because we feel confident. I mean, I am really a big old chicken scaredy cat, struggle daily with what God has asked me to do. But I'm confident that He asked and that He will provide the answer. And so it's still a wild journey of faith and obedience, but He keeps catching us and keeps showing up. So we keep saying yes.
I think that's what's been incredible about watching your journey, is just to see all of those steps come together, because you have done it in a public way, not everything, but of course, but in a public way of going on this trip and then being wrecked and then working through it and then announcing, kind of like you see that it really is just about following God. It's not about having a huge vision and getting all the right people and having a plan. But it really is about letting your heart be broken for what, breaks God's heart, and then being willing to do something about it. One of the things that you talk about, you have your latest book out. So if people are interested, you have Rhinestone Jesus, which details out all the details about that story. But then your latest book you have out, Raising World Changers in a Changing World. One of the things that you kind of are speaking to, that I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about, is that it really, you say that you had spent a lot of time trying to get people to share their abundance, share from their abundance. But really what it actually requires is a full surrender. So talk a little bit about the difference between sharing and surrender.
Well, I think our culture is really good at giving back. There are campaigns and slogans, and we give a percentage, and we feel good about giving back. And I really think that is not what God has asked us to do. He has not asked us to give back. He's asked us to give it all. And I am the first to admit that I do not give naturally. It is not in my makeup. I'm not naturally generous. I know that there are people who have that gift. One of the women who was at my table last night, just no emotional attachment to money. Her hands are open, and God's given her a gift to make money, and she gives it away. And I love that, because we're all different and unique. I am not that person. I am stingy and selfish, and I like to have a comfortable life. That's just, it is who I am, and it's how either God made me or that's my sin nature. It might be a combination of both. But in this journey, God has really shown me in such a profound way. That when I give what I have, I do not have less. I have more. And I think that's such a foreign concept for us, because we look at things in a natural sense, not in a supernatural sense. And that natural sense is if you put it on paper and you're looking at it as a mathematician or in an economic sense, if you give what you have away, you are going to have less. And I think in God's upside down kingdom, when we apply his principles to our lives, it's the exact opposite. When we share the gifts that he's given us, if it's financial, physical, resources that we have, a room in our house, a seat at our table, when we share what he has given us, we do not have less. We have more because we're doing what he's asked us to do. And so that journey taught me to start asking a very painful question that is not popular, and it's actually kind of gut-wrenching, but I just assumed for the majority of my life that every good thing in my life was a blessing. And I do understand the Bible says that every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above. And I believe that every good thing in our life is from God. But I was wrapped up in, I have this blessed life, and everything that comes in my path or in my mailbox or in my inbox, in my bank account, it's for me, like, because I'm a blessed person. And what God really showed me is, I was only asking half the question. And that is what I've received a blessing, which I assumed that it was. What I wasn't asking, the second part of that question is what I received a test. Is what God is giving me, is it for me to change my lifestyle? Or is he giving it to me so that I can change a life? And when we ask that question and we're honest and we open our hands and say, God, everything I have is a gift from you. You have filled my life and my hands with so much. Am I to use that to change my lifestyle, to make it better? I think sometimes, yes, we get to do that. We get to change our lifestyle and make it better. But sometimes that's all we do. And we're very good at that. But when we ask God, this blessing, this raise, this extra that you've given me, am I supposed to use that to change someone's life? When we are honest and we can ask that question, it changes everything. And that's really the message behind this book is we live in this culture that it lacks joy and contentment and purpose. And we're all created to have those things, to have purpose and to have joy. And we think that we get that by keeping things to ourselves. You know, that's the whole idea behind the American dream, is bigger and better. But when we share what we've been given, that is when we find the joy and purpose that we're craving and we're desperate for.
So, oh my goodness, that is so good. I love that question. I was going to bring that up. I think that's so challenging. Is this a blessing or a test? And being able to ask that, I think it's definitely something I think we all need to, incorporate into our lives, because I think it can be life-changing. But more than that, I think it can change our kids' lives. Yes. And that's what you spend a lot of your time in your book talking about, is how all of this just impacts our kids and how we teach our kids to change others' lives, not just our own. One of the things that you talk about is that we're all here for a reason, and we're put in a certain place for a reason, and that we can raise world changers right where we are. And we don't have to do it by starting our own nonprofit in Kenya, right?
Exactly.
That's not what you're calling people to do. So what does that look like for families right where they are?
I think it looks like believing that we were created to change the world. It starts there. Believing that our purpose here on this earth is to impact other people's lives for the kingdom so that they can find joy and purpose and they can meet Jesus. I mean, that's it. That is the mission of every person and the mission of our families. And we have to embrace that. And we do that by seeing the people around us and opening our eyes to the needs of others. And you don't have to go overseas to do that. You don't have to leave your neighborhood sometimes. I mean, there are people in every area of our life who are desperate for someone to see their need. And so many times we have the resources to meet those needs. Whether it's, there's a kid who lives in the neighborhood next to us whose mother died when he was in the 6th grade. My son has always felt very burdened for him. He lives with his dad, a very rough home life. And what God asked us to share with him is a seat at our table for dinner on Sunday and a chair in our car. And that's what my son has offered to this boy. And it's changed this kid's life. It's changed my son's life. It's changed our family by having this really great kid woven into our lives. And we didn't have to go very far to do that. I think we just have to open our eyes and see the needs around us, and then share what we have, whatever it is that God has placed in our hands. Because when we change one person's day and we see their need, we are changing the world. And I think that we're obsessed in our culture with bigger and better, and it has to be significant, and it has to be something newsworthy, when really it's these small, simple yeses that touch people. When I was in Kenya last week, and my 18-year-old was with me, and she was helping teach this art camp to 30 of the 45 girls that we've rescued in Nairobi. And she's an artist, and she was in her sweet spot. And it was really beautiful as a mom to spend this last few months before she goes to college having that experience with her. And it just literally, I wept with joy watching her. While my husband was here with my other kids, he texted me that they decided to bake all of these cookies and brownies with a few friends, and they went door to door and sold them so that this boy I was talking about could go to youth camp. In some people's minds, what my daughter was doing was more significant, but I was equally just as proud of my 2 younger kids because they were seeing the need of someone else. And I think our kids get that message from us. I mean, we're their model. We're their example. We are who they're emulating. And if we aren't sharing what we have with the world in need, then our kids aren't going to either. And so, I feel like if I write a parenting book, it's really not like this are the 10 things that you should do to XYZ. It's really like, this is where I felt, and this is what I've learned. And this is what, as a parent, we can do better because I've learned that the hard way. And that's a message in this book, just that, God is raising us, I mean, we're his kids, and he's disciplining us, and he's correcting our paths, and he's showing us what we're to do. And if we're obedient to that, then it's going to trickle down into our homes, and we're going to change the world and our family along the way.
Yeah, that's definitely the message that I got. I felt, as a parent, that it was really, how God had changed your life, but how that in turn, just by example, changed your family's life. Mm-hmm. But it did have impact to your family, right? I mean, doing all of this, it wasn't always easy, to say the least. But you talk about the fact that, like, 2 things is, one, the fact that you say that making your kids unhappy has actually made them happier. Like what we would say, we're scared to do certain things because, like, oh, my kids are not going to be happy, that they're going to be so upset at that. But really, you say that's sometimes their path to actual happiness.
I firmly believe it. And I think that just as a culture in general, that we are afraid of unhappy kids, We don't want the fallout. We want peace. We don't want to tell them no. And when we do, I think we're actually preparing them for the real world. I remember a few months ago, my oldest just was having a hard day, and we actually stayed home from church and made hot chocolate and sat in her bed and just talked. And she cried and I cried, and she asked me this question that kind of gutted me. She was like, "Mom, why are you so hard on me? It's just like you're so hard on me." And I wanted to defend myself and say, well, honey, no, I'm not, and compare myself to other moms, but she's right. I'm hard on her. And I told her, I said, I'm hard on you because I don't know what your life is going to hold. I don't know what sorrow, what joy, what grief you're going to experience. I don't know the challenges that you're going to face, but life is hard. The world is hard. They will not always embrace your desire for justice or your compassion for the poor. You know, we've tried to raise our kids to be different than the world, but there's a cost to that. They feel different than the world. And so if I've made everything easy and I've bailed her out of every difficult situation, and I have not prepared her for the world. And I told her that day, I said, my desire is that you lean on Jesus during these times. And that's my goal, to lead them into a relationship with Jesus so that if I'm not there, and you know, we can't always be there for our kids, but God is always with them. And, we're hard on them because the world is hard on them. And I think that, we can see in our culture just kids who have never had difficulties. Their parents have rescued them constantly and they don't have grit and they can't follow through with things. And I don't feel like that's offering a service to our kids. And so, sometimes my kids are unhappy, but I'm far enough in this journey that I'm almost daily now getting glimpses of who they are becoming and who God has created them to be. And, the joy and the meaning and the purpose in the sacrifices that we've made and the choices, the decisions that we've been a part of, I'm getting to see the fruit of that. And I mean, just this month, I think all three of my kids in a different conversation, a different way, thanked my husband and I for starting Mercy House, which I know probably doesn't sound like a big deal, but, there have been seasons, very difficult seasons, when my kids resented our yes to God, when they fought against it, when they didn't like the way that it made them stand out in a crowd, or when they just wanted to blend in, or the sacrifices that we made, just personally or financially, when they compared themselves with others. And so to have them embrace that and say, we're so proud of what God has asked us to do. Thank you for leading us. I mean, talk about joy and purpose. You know, it just is a gift from God when your kids are able to have that perspective. And sometimes it takes years. I mean, it has honestly in some ways taken years. But God is constantly writing their story. And when he rewrote my story, he also rewrote theirs. And I made a conscious choice. They did not. And so, there is fallout from that. And there are difficult times when you try to steer your family into a life of service and gratitude and perspective. It is not a popular thing in our culture, of me, you know, this selfie society. And so, there have definitely been difficult times that I've felt like we probably all needed group counseling, and we've done that. But God is faithful, and he uses our stories and our sacrifice and our yeses for his glory, and he uses them to change us.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love that. I love that you've been able to get that perspective from your kids as they've gotten older, and seen that, because it sure does make the hard times easier.
Definitely.
A little bit when you can see that, but you know, in the midst of it, you don't know that. And I think that's what's amazing, is that you just kept going even when your kids are unhappy, or you know, you had to be gone from them, or you know, all of that. They didn't get some sort of trinket, if you will, that they wanted. I mean, it's hard not to give your kids that.
It is. And a few at one point in this journey, one of my kids, in anger, it's not a favorite memory, said to me, I didn't ask for a Mercy House childhood, and that's what you've given us. Oh, wow. And it was like a knife to my heart. I mean, very painful. But at the same time, I wouldn't change it for anything, because that Mercy House childhood has taught them to see the world, the needs of the world, and it's given them a global perspective. That same kid, sometime later came back and thanked me for the Mercy House childhood because of the doors that it opened and and kids are like that, they don't see the full picture, and they don't have the maturity and the ability to look past that. And sometimes we don't either. But
I was just going to say, I think adults too can't see that, myself included, can't see that the sacrifice sometimes is good for ourselves, good for others, and even good for our kids.
Yes. And God redeems everything, even our mistakes. And I hold on to that all the time, because I've not gotten this right 100% of the time. I'm human. I've made mistakes. I've chosen wrongly. Just recently, Mercy House launched a wholesale line in New York at a handmade global market, and we're really trying to grow the wholesale side of what we do. And I'm very involved in that process of teaching our artisans product ideas when I go to Kenya. And I'm very passionate about it too. Like, it brings a lot of joy into my life. And I've shared that with my daughter, and just being an artist, and it's been something that we've done together. But I had agreed to go to the August market in New York before I realized her college orientation, like when she moves in her dorm, and it's the same day, of course. And I was trying to figure out how to do both. And I was going to fly to New York and then rush back here and then drive overnight. And I had tried to convince her and myself that I was making the right decision, that, Mercy House needed me as much as she needed me. And some friends and wise family members, basically corrected me and said, you will regret not being there for her. And I realized, when I stepped back, I realized I was making a huge mistake, that we will have an opportunity in New York every single year. And there are staff members that I can send. I don't have to be there, but I only have one time to drop my freshman off in college, and I cannot miss that. And so I apologized to her and told her I'll be there. And just the whole atmosphere in the room and the excitement about college, it all changed. So I'm still in that classroom of learning how to balance it all and how to love my family well. Mother Teresa says, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And I needed to do that day, that was what God was calling me to do. And I think that it's an important lesson, and I'm still learning those lessons. I definitely have not gotten it right, but I do believe God redeems everything. He redeems our mistakes and our heart that is in the right place, but our actions that are wrong. He redeems it, and He uses our successes and our failures to teach us and to further His kingdom. And so, yeah, I'm still learning.
Yeah, so we're not saying like make your kids miserable and it'll all turn out. No, we still have a responsibility to love our families well.
Yeah.
So I think it is just figuring out where those lines are with each decision. It's not a clean cut. It's not a clean cut line.
It's a lot of
first win.
Yes, a lot of prayer, a lot of leaning into what Jesus wants you to do. And in this whole journey, that has been the constant truth, that it's as hard today as it was 9 years ago when we were trying to figure out how to respond, because God asks us to do things that are bigger than us, that surpass our ability, that demand that we get alone with our Creator and lean on Him and lay our burdens down and ask Him, beg Him for clarity. And I think that is a truth that no matter what we're doing in life, we need Jesus. We need that relationship with Him. We need to press into what He wants us to do and ask for the courage to do it. And that is something that every day it's a requirement in this journey of faith, that if I am struggling, I know that it's probably because I'm not leaning into that. And so we can't say yes to God without it. It's imperative.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think that is a perfect way to wrap up. It's just that we need Jesus. We have to lean on him, and whatever he has prepared for us to do, he will tell us and he will guide us every step of the way. And I so appreciate you sharing with us this journey that you've been on. I know it just inspires me so much, and it's going to inspire the people listening too. If people want to connect with Mercy House, with you, with your book, what's the best way for them to do that?
wearethatfamily.com is where I've been blogging for 10 years now. So I'm still writing there. There's also a link to mercyhouseglobal.org from that site. And then books are also available. Everything that's kind of a landing page. So good place to connect.
Okay. I just wanted to I didn't get a full chance to go through the whole story, but one of the things that you share the whole story, so I'll let them read it in the book, about Fair Trade Friday. And I'm part of the Earrings of the Month Club, and I just absolutely love it. I'm wearing a pair right now. So people need to check that out.
Yes, that's a practical, really entry level, but very significant way to get involved with Mercy House. Plus you get really cute stuff in the mail every month. So it helps us change the world for thousands of women around the globe.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again so much, Kristen.
Thank you.
Oh man, guys. I don't know about you, but Kristen, and I said it at the beginning, but Kristen inspires me every time I hear her. She inspires me and challenges me. I am so thankful for the ministry that she is doing, the way that she has surrendered her life, and the work that she is doing with Mercy House Kenya. It just opens my eyes every single time we talk. And today in particular, I am just so encouraged to just lay it all on the line. I love how she talked about God has not asked us to give back. He has asked us to give it all. And when we do that, we do not have less, we have more. And so then we have to start asking the question, if everything that we have is God's, then is that to make my lifestyle better, or is that to change another life? And I think we have to come to the conclusion pretty quickly that it's to change another person's life so often, more often than we realize and assume, that is to improve our own lifestyle. Definitely convicting to me first of all. But that is the key that she has seen to joy and contentment. And, I just look up to Kristen so much just because she's been there. She's done the thing, she's taken the leap of faith. She has been for years doing the hard things and has come out of it and said, this is the way, walk in it. This is the path to your true joy and contentment. No, it is not easy all the time, but that is the way to fill all the holes that we have. Yes, first in Jesus Christ, and he will do that. But the way that we live our life is to be found in surrendering everything that we have to God to be used to help somebody else's life. And I love that at the beginning, even that she talked about that was really, it's not going to look the same for all of us. Sorry, text message. This is real life here. I'm not even going to edit that out. Hi, Marie. Marie is one of my friends and listeners. I talked about her. She just texted me. So, but I just love that it is a meeting of our passion, our skill, and God's timing. And I think that is so hard sometimes because, number one, with passion, sometimes we even, we have to find what our passion is. Sometimes we have to get out there and try some things to figure out what are we passionate about. You may not know that you're passionate about teenagers because you've never went out to work with a youth group. You have to try some different things to figure out what are you really passionate about. Skills sometimes can be hard to figure out because sometimes our skills are so natural that we don't even recognize how good we are at them because it's just so natural. You're like, isn't everybody good at this? It's just come so easily to me. And you don't recognize it. Sometimes we have to have some people speak into our lives to tell us what our skill is. You can ask people that are close to you, like, when you think about me, what are the things do you think I'm good at? And you might be surprised at what you hear. And then the last one is always so hard, God's timing. So you might have this passion for a person and you have this skill, but then maybe it's not God's timing. And that is so hard to hear that and to feel that and to know that perhaps you do have this passion burning, but it's not the time. And I think as it is with Kristen, that the timing worked out. So she was writing on her blog because she was passionate and skillful at writing to mothers. And then through God's timing, she, I would say he expanded her territory and just changed that into something different. Even though the passion and the skill stayed the same, God's timing and how he wanted to use that changed. So, I am just so... I'm just so encouraged and so challenged and inspired by Kristen, and I hope you are too. Just for all of us to surrender it all, not just to share, but to surrender. And that's just such a good word for all of us. So I'm so thankful, Kristen. Please, and of course, what we talked about is how that impacts our kids. And as parents, we do have a responsibility to grow our kids and to train them and discipline them to live the way that God would have us. So it starts with us, and then it goes to our kids. So I would just so encourage you to pick up her book. That's going to be linked in the show notes. And also connect with Kristen as well. So thank you guys so much for listening this week. Don't forget you can connect with us on social media on our accounts, Abiding Ministries. If you want to share this episode, would love that so much. And I haven't asked for it in a while, but I would love for you to subscribe if you're not already subscribed in iTunes or wherever you subscribe to a podcast. And then please on iTunes, leave a review. That would help so much for people to know that it's worth checking out. And I hope it has been for you, especially today. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on Feathers.